Got rid of the jabs, and poof, the pandemic was over.
No one has ever died from a virus. Those who die always die from complications caused by the viral infection. The science is easy to find and very easy to corroborate from many independent sources.
The planning goes all the way back to 1991. Dig deeper.
Vaccinated people are just as likely as unvaccinated people to spread the Delta variant to contacts in their
I like
household.
not wearing a mask in public. I love confrontation.
The PCR test is a lie. The 15 days to flatten is a lie.
The most marginalized
the mask
group in
is a
America
lie.
are the unvaccinated, and the
jab
impressions
is a
we
lie.
face
The
are
emails
systemic.
obtained
Our
against
government
victims of
reshapes
paper
consciousness,
IVM
preferably in the form of
definitely
replied
just
vaccination,
vaccinations
even 100
banned
days of
September.
vaccinations,
Just
right?
ahead,
My body,
the
my
official
choice.
vaccine mandate announcement.
If you're an atheist,
In an attempt to
pray.
control the
By the
narrative,
way, it's Columbus
why
Day,
include
which is
vaccines
also
when you
the
could
only
just
name
change
for
the
today,
definition?
Myside also being a Monday. Thanks for listening.
I'm Celeste.
I'm Michaela.
I'm CJ.
And I'm Yama.
We spent the last 30 days testing our boundaries and forcing ourselves into uncomfortable situations on Twitter. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter. We're all familiar with social media, but do you ever think about how your social media is tailored to you? Did one of your mutuals just tweet in support of puppy kicking? Block. If you're someone who screens out material not conforming to your existing preferences and values, you might want to take a step back and consider how doing so affects you personally. Insulating yourself from others' points of view may be reinforcing your biases in a not so great way. Keith Stanovich, author of The Bias That Divides Us, discusses the error of transforming value differences into ignorance. For example, mistaking a dispute about legitimate differences in the weighting of values relevant to an issue for one in which your opponents just don't know the facts. This is to emphasize the importance of understanding issues on the basis of values as a way to reduce Myside thinking. As Stanovich plainly puts it,
if a societal problem is squarely and contentiously in the domain of politics, it is probably not just a matter of facts.
Take the issue of income inequality, for example. When we look at how wealth is distributed in the United States, there are two big gaps: the gap between the middle and upper class, and the gap between the middle and lower class. Both of these gaps are important and should be reduced for greater income inequality. But there's a problem. Policy that would help close one gap might as well open the other one up. This is where values come in. A person for greater income equality must make the value judgment of what gap means more, because fixing both isn't exactly a realistic solution.
okay, cool. So reduce our Myside bias by starting to think more about values. Got it. What else, Stanovich?
Recognize that beliefs have their own interests, and for each of us to use this insight to put a little distance between ourselves and our beliefs. That distance might turn some of our convictions into testable beliefs, and the fewer of our beliefs that are convictions, the less Myside bias we're likely to display.
Oh, thanks, dude. That makes sense. I'm at Wubbabud. I'm at Catherine Sisaltu.
I'm at Sterling Beach.
And I'm at Gross Liberal.
We spend 30 days following and interacting with opposite-minded people, specifically in the realm of COVID-19 #antivax. Doing this, we hope to gain an understanding of value differences when it comes to this hot-button topic, and also expose ourselves to different opinions while following the advice of our guy Stanovich, to distance ourselves from our beliefs. Do we reduce our Myside thinking, or do we crack under the pressure when Candace Owens decided to tweet out that the unvaccinated are the most marginalized? Stay tuned.
So how do we develop fake personas on Twitter that are completely polar opposite from our personal views? Well, first we have to find out where we stood on a political spectrum. Using the political compass quiz, we were able to get an idea of how we perceive politics and what we need to expose ourselves in order to conduct our Myside bias project. We found out that we are all on the libertarian left end of the political spectrum, and we needed to expose ourselves to the authoritarian right. Once we figured out the direction we needed to go with what content we needed to seek out on Twitter, we started developing our personas. We created fake emails to use and created fake Twitter accounts posing as either propaganda accounts like Yamini and her gross liberals account, or like Celeste, Michaela, and myself as fake people. We did some research on prominent conservative people or accounts to follow on Twitter and started exposing ourselves to the general postings from the accounts we followed. At first, it was hard to navigate Twitter. Some of us had never used Twitter before, or had never scrolled through social media as means of conducting an experiment. At first, I was kind of scared to use Twitter. It felt kind of wrong to be retweeting and interacting with people saying opinions I thought were politically incorrect or just flat out lies. I was worried somehow this account would get traced back to me and I would be confronted with all the crazy things I had been retweeting and liking about the pandemic. However, in the first couple days in trying to start up my Twitter, I felt like my account was trying to steer me away from all the conservative and far-right media accounts I was trying to follow. And it wouldn't be until 2 weeks on Twitter until I got updates on posts that aligned with my fake account's interests. At that point, I felt like I got exposed to more accounts that weren't really stating facts, but were just saying polarizing opinions about the pandemic and vaccine.
For me, my approach was trying to find accounts with similar usernames as mine to increase my authoritarian reach. While it worked to some extent, a lot of my Twitter was pretty split between liberal and conservative tweets, so I had to do a lot of digging, liking, and retweeting to make my Twitter page stand against what I thought was right. The more tweets I liked, the deeper I fell into the right side, and it took around 2 weeks to completely change my page. The biggest worry I had was trying to remain unbiased and untriggered. In fact, liking a message that I completely disagreed with was harder than I thought.
I established my account and feed by creating a new Gmail account and only using Twitter on my laptop. Google Chrome has the ability to switch between accounts, isolating your search history to each one. This allowed me to build my feed completely from scratch by simply following Republican politicians and popular conservative advocates. We then decided to focus on the pandemic. So I began by searching the popular hashtags such as #Plandemic. Through liking, retweeting, and digging through comments, my homepage grew and my patience dwindled.
I made my account and started browsing the hashtag pro-life to get my feet wet. This was before we put an emphasis on COVID content, and I have to say, I think it was a lot easier to deal with than the COVID stuff. One of the first things I came across was a tweet replying to another one that said, 45% of mothers die within the first 24 hours after giving birth. Is that not a high enough risk for you? The person replying said, did Planned Parenthood tell you that? The whole impression the tweet and the response it gave me was aggravating. This person was using this absurd, maybe satirical tweet to leverage their own belief. It made me wonder, could this be something that happens in my own sphere? Generally, if I see something conservative-minded, it's something reposted by someone not conservative-minded who's making fun of or criticizing it. It helped me open my mind a bit.
By the time we started week 2 of this experience, scrolling through Twitter was not as fun or interesting anymore.
So I'm just sitting in my bed, trying to get research done for this film, and I'm just getting so sick of what everyone is saying. It's just the same thing over and over again. People protesting against wearing masks. People having issues with mandated vaccines, and I'm just done. It's so boring now.
Constantly having to read tweets that attack your beliefs is incredibly taxing, and it became increasingly difficult to remain silent. We were only liking and retweeting posts that we disagreed with instead of showing appreciation for the comments contradicting them.
However, we had to remain strong, because the goal of this project was to expose ourselves to the other side's views and see how it affected us. And at this point, the effect was frustration.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Especially when the CDC decided to change the definition of vaccines and the Twitterverse exploded.
For context, the definition before the change was the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce immunity to a specific disease. The new definition is the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce protection to a specific disease. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Didn't I just read the same definition twice? Essentially, yes. The word immunity was changed to protection, and this was solely due to how misleading the word immunity is. Immunity implies complete protection. If someone says they are immune to a disease, you assume they mean they cannot get it or catch it.
However, immunity just means protection against a disease, so the CDC decided to change the word to make this sentiment more clear. Many anti-vaxxers used this change as a way to discredit the COVID vaccines, saying that they clearly do not work if the CDC has to change the definition for them. This argument is incredibly convincing if you do not know the specifics of the definition update or the meaning of immunity. We also realized that the main driving forces behind a lot of these beliefs were distrust and fear. This is not a new phenomenon. Many academics have done research on this topic. A 2016 article using a 2003 multi-state survey of parents of school-aged children found that parental distrust of the government and of healthcare providers is a significant factor related to a number of vaccine-related beliefs and behaviors. These distrustful parents are also significantly more likely to think that sources from the government or the FDA on vaccines are unreliable. These parents are also 2.11 times more likely to seek complementary/alternative medicine providers for their medical advice. It doesn't help that there are organizations consisting of actual doctors that will spew out false research papers and inaccurate articles, adding to the confusion.
A couple of Twitter references I came across cited the 12 people who were accounted for as the Disinformation Dozen. The Disinformation Dozen were 12 anti-vaxxers who played leading roles in spreading digital misinformation about COVID vaccines. They were selected because they had large numbers of followers, produced high volumes of anti-vaccine content, and had seen a recent rapid growth of their social media accounts. It seemed ironic enough that Twitter would still cite the Disinformation Dozen even though they'd been flagged as untrue, and disinformation was in their name. For those that were anti-vax and anti-mask, it only seemed logical to support these people as they'd been proven to be responsible for up to 65% of anti-vaccine content. To me, it seemed that they chose to ignore the truth behind the 12 people and stick to what they believed is right. So that left me questioning, is the problem them being ignorant, or is the problem from the lack of trust? Because anyone or anything could be painted as disinformative on Twitter. The 30 days ended sooner than expected, and the daily/weekly Twitter scrolls left us with more emotions than expected. It seemed like the more we pushed ourselves to immerse us in the opposing side, the more it backfired, where I couldn't begin to understand why people were so anti-vax. As definitions changed and doctors spoke to the public about the dangers of becoming anti-vax compared to the anti-vaccine mandate, I finally began to understand the fear. Rather than being fearful of the COVID vaccine, Americans were worried about losing their freedom to choose what goes into their bodies. Projecting these fears through conspiracy theories, changing definitions of #MyBodyMyChoice, and refuting the science behind the vaccine seemed like an easier explanation than wanting to admit that sometimes you don't have total control over public health decisions that impact you personally. While to us, the obvious choice was to get vaccinated to protect our community, to others it seemed like their basic human rights were being stripped. Only being able to interact with opposing beliefs seemed like a fun idea in the beginning, but the more I learned of the beliefs of those that believe anything, the more frustrating it became to relate. While to us students it seemed common sense to fact-check our data, many don't have the time or energy to find the scientific evidence that backs up their claim. Rather than looking at published data, they resulted in doing their own fact-checking, where they end up on news articles that are super opinionated, just reaffirming their belief in the first place. Through Twitter and its ability to find those similar to yourself, it became increasingly easy to fall into the trap of Myside bias. That problem lasted outside of Twitter too. From news articles to fake published studies that cherry-picked their data, it brought to light the issue of misinformation. I mean, just look at the AAPS and their data on the effects of hydroxychloroquine. Why wouldn't you believe their claims? Oh wait, you shouldn't, because lo and behold, they are uncredited and all in all, not the best doctors.
With technology consistently becoming more prominent in our everyday lives, it is difficult to remember that there are real people behind the usernames. It is too easy to think the worst of people and to imagine some crazy person spewing nonsense. This experience forced me to attempt to understand why people think differently than I, and reminded me to respect people regardless of their opinions.
Honestly, Twitter sucks. The times people say funny things are alright, but when it comes to the hatred and negativity people display on the platform, it's a no from me. At the end of the month, I wanted no part of looking at my feed. I definitely feel like I learned some about where other people come from and why they think the way they do, but I don't feel like I've gained much or have had much change in terms of what I believe in.
In the end, it wasn't about how knowledgeable the Twitter community was. Rather, how did they respond to the fear? Did some find the science data but get misled by doctors or news articles? Did others believe the conspiracy theories more? Or did some believe that it was a violation of their basic human rights, and in turn became anti-vax, anti-mask? Falling into your Myside bias does not determine intelligence when it comes to such topics. Rather, it depends on the background and upbringings of the person's experiences. Like Stanovich said, it depends on the basis of values.
So, what did we get out of this experience? And was our Myside bias reduced? It's hard to exactly quantify how our Myside bias was affected by this experience, but we were able to come together and agree that we all have gained a deeper understanding of belief systems and are less likely to jump to conclusions about people who think differently from us, as in lumping people who are anti-vax into one category of uneducated and misinformed. We recognize different people, us included, have different upbringings, life experiences, and social connections that affect our worldview and how we approach different issues. As a final note, we believe that doing this 30-day experiment has taught us to be more conscious of other views, which we count as reducing our Myside bias.
Is it necessary that every single person on this planet expresses every single opinion that they have on every single thing that occurs all at the same time? Is that necessary? Or to ask it a slightly different way, can anyone shut the fuck up?